Okay, happy Flag Day, or 4th of July, or anytime you want something patriotic. Today, I'm going to take two of my favorite Tim Holtz fabrics, or just grab any red and cream, red and white stripe, any ticking stripe, or just anything that kind of reads a stripe print, and something that is either a solid blue or a very blue on blue print, like I'm using here, and we are going to make this. So this is a super simple dowel rod with a little bead on the top that I just E6000 in place. We're going to sew up a cute little flag, do a little decorative zigzaggy stitching, do a little decorative star stitching here, machine stitch a really tight little channel. This actually is completely loose. It slides up and down, but I did stitch it pretty tight on there. And finally finish with an assortment of fun decorative trims. Some of these are Tim Holtz. I did a little star here also from Tim, but just any trims that you have in your stash that will work. And then we're going to finish by tucking all of these cute stars into a display. So keep watching and see how easy it is to make your own flags for decoration. So this is a fabulous project for scraps if you have them. I actually have this remnant cut from something else, and I think this is going to be, yes, this is the correct width. So we're just going to see how many we can get out of this scrap before we have to dive into yardage, because I'm always a fan of utilizing what I have first. And this is not a project that has to be super precise. Do I want my stripes not going diagonal? Yes. But other than that, we're just going to kind of let it go how it goes. So I'm going to get this to be about 5 inches is as wide as I am doing this. So I am going to go ahead and just get that smoothed out. And I am going to line it up with the seam because my fabric was already kind of folded in half. And then I will just simply use that where I just cut as a guide to line it up. It doesn't have to be perfect. Again, I just don't want it super wonky. And I'm going to see how many I can make out of this piece of fabric. Because I'd really like to put several in this display that I'm making. Okay, so I have my red and white stripes here. And I want to do the blue part. And what I found was easiest is I want to just put a little fusible on the back of my piece. So what I'm going to do, because I don't have any more scraps of this, currently everything I have has too much white in it and it's not going to show my cute little star. So I am just going to cut a strip that's 2.5 inches wide, and the blue portion on here is about 2.5 by 6.5. And I'm just going to cut this strip off of my little bolt here so I can put this away. And then we'll prep the fabric. What I forgot to mention too, this is actually a Christmas print. Don't be limited by what season the fabric may have come out for. Completely, if you're like me, I actually kind of put my fabrics in a more rainbow order because this gets used for all kinds of things, not just Christmas. And this is such a beautiful combination for Patriotic that, you know, I wouldn't have maybe noticed if I was only going by season or collection. And I'm obviously using Tim Holtz fabrics, but you could use absolutely anything that you have and love. Don't feel like you have to be limited to just one certain brand or company. You could totally mix and match. This was just really hitting that vibe that I wanted, and I love my Tim Holtz fabrics. And I was like, what else can I do with them? And something really quick and easy. And this is what I settled on. And we're also going to just flip this one out too. This one might need a little extra trimming. I am definitely not being quite as precise as I would be if I was making a quilt, but preciseness is not really required for this project. In fact, I kind of think the wonkier? No. Somewhat wonky is really cute for this. I don't want it to be too wonky. Okay, keep these scraps. Perfect to cut into little 1.5 inch, or you could even do 2.5 with these, but for postage stamp projects or other little scrappy things. I always find something for my Tim Holtz scraps. Okay, so I have some heat and bond fusible here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut a piece of this and then we'll cut it down. But it's a double-sided adhesive product, which is what I want for this. And I'm going to see if I can cut multiples at one time. So again, I want this to be 2.5 inches wide. By 6.5 long, and it is a little bit curly. But what we're going to do then is we are going to go and iron this to the back of our blue piece. We'll just fuse it on here, and then when it's cooled, you can peel off your backing paper and we'll be able to fuse it in place on our flag. But we want to do something with our flag before we fuse it in place. So let me go over to the iron and fuse each of these, and I'll be right back. Okay, so here is what our piece looks like. I've got my fusible on the back of each of these. It's okay that it's frayed. We want that. But this is just going to help us get the position just right. Okay, so let's set those all aside now that they're prepped. And let's take our red and white stripe portion. What I need is I'm going to grab some scrap batting. Here's one that I have prepped. We've got our fabric, we have a little batting, and then we have some scrap fabric, which you're not really going to see. It is going to have raw edges, but that's just going to help us for the quilting. And then I'm going to spray baste. You can see I've prepped this one. I've spray basted my layers together so that we can go in and do some really cute decorative stitching, or you could just do straight line stitching. And I'm going to show you how I do that on my Janome machine, which is not the one I use for most of my sewing, full disclosure. It used to be, but it does a really great decorative stitch, and that's what we want to do for this. So let's prep all of our things so we can go do all of our quilting all at once. So I am not super concerned with this being straight. I'm not even going to use my rotary cutter for these layers because I want them bigger anyway. And then we're just going to cut them down after we've done the quilting. And I want to make sure that they're going to fit. So let's see. Let's actually do them this way. And make sure that we're cutting our batting. This is just some scrap batting I have left over from like a quilt project or something. That's what one of the things I like to use it for. So there's a couple, and we'll have a little bit extra to cut off of this too, but I actually still have like a pretty nice piece here. So I just like to fold that up. Okay, now we don't need it near as long as what I have cut this. Any of this actually. So let's just use our fabric as a little guide. Maybe just like a 1/2 inch bigger. So there's a couple. let's see, that is 2. So let's just put those together there. This is actually can be another one. I don't think that piece is long enough, but it's big enough for some other small projects. Okay. And then I'm going to press these really quickly so we get any of the wrinkles out before we go and do our decorative stitching. And then I'm going to spray base them as well. And I'm going to go do that outside because I don't want any of that sticky in here. And I also don't want any of that aerosol in here. Okay, so I use this basting adhesive. I've basted my layers together. And now we're going to go do a fun zigzag stitch, really just following the design of the fabric. So kind of on either side of the red, did a little zigzag stitch, a really wide one. You could also just do a nice straight stitch, or you could do something like crosshatch. It doesn't have to be straight, but I'm just going to kind of follow the stripes in the fabric. Okay, now that we have our flags all quilted, we're simply going to trim them out so that they are nice and cleaned up before we do the rest of our stitching. And this is where I do try to square them up for the most part. And they shouldn't be too wonky. And here is what that panel looks like. And then what we're going to do is we're going to fold this in half to find the center and fold this in half to find the center. And then we're going to line those up just like this. And we're going to go and fuse this in place with our iron. Okay, so I fused this piece to my quilted piece. At this point, what we're going to do is we can just kind of fold it in half so we can look. But about 1/4 of an inch in is where we will eventually be sewing this seam. This space, pardon me, I have the hiccups. This space over here is where we want to draw our star. So I'm just going to take a white pencil. You can also use an erasable pencil if you want to. And I'm going to draw kind of my, and I kind of like mine wonky. So yes, mine may not be equal because I want it to be wonky. And I'm going to go over to the sewing machine. We're going to fold this back out now. And I'm going to sew over this. And I went over mine 3 times because, and this one was actually a little too far over here, but that's okay. They're supposed to be wonky. But I just did a regular straight stitch 3 times over this, just like that. And after we sew that, what we're going to do is we're going to stitch around the whole perimeter of this. About 2 times, I think, is all I did. So we're going to just go all the way. And what we're going to do is we're going to stitch this, but then we're going to go ahead and stitch all the way around the perimeter of our flag as well. So kind of going all the way around twice. And that's because I want to secure all of these edges, because the last thing we're going to do is sew this seam right here so that we can slide this over our dowel stick. So let's draw our stars on here, and then I'll take you over to the machine to sew up our stars. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to sew the star first. And after we have sewn the star, and I like to go around it about 3 times, Then we're going to stitch down this part, which I have already fused on here. And then we'll stitch around here, and finally we'll stitch the channel that our dowel stick will go in. So I just draw on here with like a chalk pencil, or I used, I think, a white pencil, but the line will go away. And I'm using a pretty moderate, normal, regular seam or a stitch length, pardon me. And of course, it's going to be a lot of pivots. And what I think makes the star look especially nice, since we're not doing like perfection or applique and whatever, and we have like lots of raw ends, is I want it to be slightly wonky. So we're not going to sew exactly on the line. We're going to go close to it, over it, a little wonky, a little further. That one was kind of right on top. That's fine. The more times you sew over it, the cuter it gets, I think. Back to where we started. Just going to snip off that, and let's take a look at our star, and that looks amazing. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew around this 3 times, and then we're going to sew around the perimeter of our flag. So let's start here and sew this. And the reason I'm only doing these 3 sides is because we are going to end up going around our flag, but we're not there quite yet. So I'm just going to start here. I am going to do a little back stitch. I don't want it to come loose. And kind of the same thing as with the star. I don't want this super perfect. I'm just going to reverse it, and we're going to go back. And I'm going to go one more time. Okay, so now we're going to pivot, and we're going to sew the top of this and go all the way around. Okay, I went around twice, and the reason is we are going to sew it again, but Now, as you can see, we've got all of our great stitching. We're going to fold it in half. And I do like to hold it together with some clips at this point. And we're just going to clip, clip, clip it all. And then we're going to slide our dowel stick in here, and then we're going to draw a little line so we know where to stitch on, because we're going to stitch down this. And then once this is stitched, we don't want to stitch over where the channel is that our dowel stick's going to go in. So that's when we're going to go ahead and stitch all of these layers together. Okay, so we have stitched our star. We've stitched our blue panel around. I like the fraying. You can pull some of this off and trim it if you want to. I like it. And then I stitched all the way around my flag a couple of times to reinforce it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it in half. And I'm going to use my dowel stick that I've already pre-prepped here. And I am going to mark with this air erasable pen. And I think that's going to be tight enough. And what I'm going to do then, we're going to pull that out. And I'm just going to draw my line right here. Because what we're going to do is we're going to sew this, but we're also going to sew these two layers together. So that'll be our third stitching, and it's going to go through all those layers at once. So I am going to pin this, or probably clip it together with some clips, and we're going to sew down this seam. And we are going to do a little back stitch, and we're going to sew like that. And I used an air erasable marker, so it will fade over time. And then I like to make sure that my dowel stick goes in, and it does. And you can see it's a nice tight fit, exactly what I want. So let's take that out again. And we're going to start right here where our channel is, and we're going to do a little back stitch. And I'm just going to stitch around all of these layers. To secure our flag. Okay, so now these are not loose, and we have one flag piece just like this. And of course, we will put our dowel stick in here. I have to glue another little ball here on the end of this, and then we can embellish how we want, fray up these edges, maybe kind of clean up some of the long fraying on here. But that is how you sew the decorative stitching for the flag. Okay, before we put our flag onto our dowel stick, I do like to go with my scissors, and I like to gently rough up these edges. One of the great things about this batting layer in here is it gives us kind of a nice little fluffy edge. I kind of like it. You don't want to go super rough here. You don't want to tear through your stitches, but I like to rough it up. And then if you want, you can go in and kind of snip it and clean that up a little bit. If it's a little too frayed for you, you don't have to rough it up either. You can just leave it raw. That's fine too. But look at how awesome that looks. And if these are a little too long. I'm going to just pull some of these and fray up that edge a little. Look how cute that is. All right. Then I'm going to go in just like this and put our flag in place. And we're going to repeat this for all of them, or however many you're making, or maybe you're just making one. It's a great use of your scraps. And then we're going to decorate it. And I'm going to show you some of the things I pulled out to decorate this. And I may do some of them different if I run out of certain trims, but I'm just going to kind of go to my stash of ribbons and trims, and we're going to decorate this up cute. So for this first one, I'm going to copy what I did here. This is kind of that, I think Tim Holtz calls this his mummy cloth. Obviously, it's used at Halloween time, but it is the perfect material to use on this. I love it. It kind of has a really nice drape to it. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to tie this here up to the top. Nice little length of it. And then I have some of Tim's like velvet trims. And what I'm going to do with these is I'm just going to drape a red, white, and blue in here. Nothing fancy at all. Just going to put some pretty little trims. That's probably the last of the red. I've used a lot of that for Christmas things as well. And I'm just going to kind of lay those in here for right now. We're going to tie them in so that they have a nice drape to them. I'm also going to take some of this baker's twine, and let's get a bow tool and make a little bow with it. So I'm going to make a 1.5 inch bow, and I'm going to leave a nice little tail here. I want everything to drape really nice, and I'm just going to make a single bow for this. Just like that. And we're going to tie all of this into our mummy cloth. Okay, I lied. I'm not going to put my bow in here. I'm just going to tie these ribbon trims into here for now. And just kind of drape them down like so. And I'm going to glue this to this. And I'm going to knot these ends just to give them a little extra decorative touch. Clean those up a little bit. And you can use hot glue to glue this on. I'm actually going to use E6000, and I will show you why. Okay, so I don't like to use hot glue with my metal stars. They just do not stay put. So I like to use a little E6000 for this. And I used to get the big tubes of E6000, but I don't use it near enough. So these little tubes are great because if they get gunky, I just throw it away and get a new one. So I'm going to put a little bit here. I'm going to put my bow in, the little tiny bow for the baker's twine. And then right on top of that, I'm going to put another little bit of glue. And it doesn't dry super fast like hot glue either. And we're going to take our star and we're going to put it right in the center of our baker's twine bow. Now, my suggestion is to let this sit up probably overnight. I don't know how long it takes to dry, but I think that works the best. And then we have, I'm not going to swing this around, but we have a beautiful flag easy decoration, super easy, great to use with your fabric scraps, or, you know, grab some of these wonderful Tim Holtz fabrics or whatever you have and sew up some flags. I'm going to show you these in decorated in like with some flowers and stuff for a table display. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. And if you make some flags, please make sure, tag me, show me what you made. I would love, love, love to see your flags for patriotic decor and display.